The Harry Potter novels cover 7 years' time, and in that time it caught the attention of millions of readers. But what happened after that 7th year? We got a little taste of what life after Hogwarts was like in the epilogue, but that just barely scratches the surface of what we know. Rowling has released tons of information about so many different characters, and in this video I'm going to go over what happened to 90 main Harry Potter characters after the series ended. Harry Potter. As we know from the epilogue, Harry married Ginny, and together they had 3 kids, Albus, James, and Lily. But going past the epilogue, Rowling revealed much more about the hero of our story. He did not return to Hogwarts for a 7th year, instead becoming an Auror or a Dark Wizard Catcher, the job he always dreamed of doing while at Hogwarts. He eventually became head of the Auror office at the age of only 26, becoming the youngest head of a department in history. He also returned to Hogwarts every once in a while to give lectures to students about defense against the dark arts, much like he did when he ran the DA. On top of that, he was featured on a chocolate frog card for all he had done, which only the most famous and celebrated witches and wizards have the honor of.
I'm getting home after a month.
Ron Weasley. As we know from the epilogue, Ron married Hermione, and together they had 2 kids, Rose and Hugo. He was also made the godfather of Harry and Ginny's oldest son, James. Going past the epilogue though, like Harry, Ron opted to skip his 7th year at Hogwarts, and he too became an Auror at the Ministry of Magic. However, after 2 years of this, he retired and instead helped his brother George run his joke shop. As Ron stated though, his finest hour was being put on a chocolate frog card just like Harry. Hermione Granger. As I said, Hermione married Ron and they had 2 children named Rose and Hugo. After the Battle of Hogwarts, Hermione found her parents in Australia and restored their memories, giving her her parents back. Unlike Harry and Ron, Hermione actually went back to Hogwarts to finish her 7th and final year, and afterwards she started working for the Ministry of Magic. She worked her way up, starting with the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, where she continued her work with Spew, fighting for house elf rights. She later became the deputy head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, where she assisted the ministry in eradicating the old laws biased in favor of purebloods, which was a game changer. Eventually, Hermione herself would become Minister of Magic, though this happened in The Cursed Child, so I would take that with a grain of salt. Hermione also translated her copy of the Tales of Beedle the Bard, the book Dumbledore had left her, which was originally written in runes, and she published it with all of Dumbledore's notes on every page. Because of all of her accomplishments, she joined both Harry and Ron in getting her own chocolate frog card. Ginny Weasley. After the Battle of Hogwarts, Ginny rekindled her relationship with Harry, and the two eventually got married. Ginny also pursued a career as a professional Quidditch player, and she played for the Holyhead Harpies. She retired when she and Harry wanted to start a family though, and as I already stated, they had 3 kids named James, Albus, and Lily. When the kids got a bit older, Ginny started a new career as a Quidditch correspondent for the Daily Prophet, and she made a huge name for herself in this field when she covered the 2014 Quidditch season, which ended in her covering that year's World Cup. Neville Longbottom. Following Neville's badass part in the Battle of Hogwarts, he became an Auror following the war. However, he only did this for a short time, instead pursuing his real passion of herbology. McGonagall accepted his application to teach at Hogwarts, and Neville joined the herbology department, working under his favorite professor at Hogwarts, Professor Sprout. He would sometimes impress his students by showing off his DA coin, which had become something of a badge of honor. Neville eventually became the head of Gryffindor House, which is fitting because he's one of the bravest Gryffindors who ever lived, even if he didn't start out that way. Unfortunately for Nuna fans, the two never actually dated. That was just something the filmmakers came up with. Neville actually ended up with a Hufflepuff student that was in their year who was also a fellow DA member named Hannah Abbott. The two lived at the Leaky Cauldron where Hannah was the landlady. The two had a happy life together but never had kids, although Neville was made the godfather of Harry and Ginny's middle child, Albus Potter. Luna Lovegood. Following the series, Luna became a famous wizarding naturalist who traveled the world in search of strange creatures. She discovered and classified many species that no one had ever seen before, but she was never able to find the Crimplehorn Snorkack, a made-up creature that her and her father were convinced existed. Luna ended up marrying fellow naturalist Ralph Scamander, the grandson of Newt Scamander, the man behind the textbook Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and of course the star of the prequel films.
Hello.
Luna and Ralph eventually had twin boys named Lorcan and Lysander, but they were much younger than the trio's kids, as Luna did not start a family until much later in life. Albus Dumbledore. Yes, I know, Albus died, but there are some notable things to go over after the series ended. Harry decided to name his second son Albus after his former headmaster, which shows how much Harry respected his mentor. Dumbledore's portrait lived on in the headmaster's office, and his portrait was known to speak wise words to students who entered. In The Cursed Child, which again I would take with a grain of salt, Harry and Dumbledore's portrait had a conversation where they told each other that they loved each other, one of the few good moments in the stage play. Severus Snape. Yes, I know, Snape also died, but he too had some notable points to go over after the series ended. Harry's middle child was also named after Snape, as he gave Albus the middle name Severus. Snape's portrait was not automatically hung in the headmaster's office, despite him being a headmaster for a year, but Harry, in one of his acts of showing reconciliation to Snape, made sure that his portrait was placed there. Harry also cleared Snape's name, telling everyone how brave he had been and how he had been on their side the whole time. Voldemort. Another dead character, but again some things to go over. After the series ended, Rowling told fans the horrid ending Voldemort had upon being killed. Because he had split his soul so many times, and as Rowling described it, mutilated his soul was trapped in limbo for eternity. Because of the destruction done to it, he was unable to move on or return to the land of the living as a ghost. The man who feared death more than anything got a fate far more horrific than death. Also, after he was gone, everyone who had once feared to speak his name now felt no fear in doing so. Draco Malfoy. After seeing everything his family had believed in crumble, Draco became a changed man. He and Harry made peace following the Battle of Hogwarts, though they were never really friends. As we found out from the epilogue, Draco married Astoria Greengrass, who was actually the younger sister of a Slytherin girl in his year named Daphne Greengrass. They eventually had a son named Scorpius, and they raised him very differently than Draco was raised. Scorpius was taught that Muggles and Muggleborn should be respected, which did not sit well with Draco's parents, Lucius and Narcissa. This led to some awkward family gatherings filled with tension. Following their death, though, Draco inherited Malfoy Manor and all of his family's wealth. Unfortunately, that money and wealth did not help when Astoria got sick and passed away when Scorpius was only in his 3rd year at Hogwarts, leaving Draco to raise his son as an only father. Kingsley Shacklebolt. Following the war, Kingsley was made the Minister of Magic, and he made it his duty to rid the Ministry of corruption and discrimination. He also banned the use of Dementors to guard Azkaban, and made sure that they would not be used to torment the opponents of the Ministry any longer. Kingsley revolutionized the way the Ministry worked, especially with the help of Hermione Granger, who would of course take his place as Minister of Magic when Kingsley stepped down. Dudley Dursley. Last we saw Dudley, he was making amends with his cousin Harry.
I don't think you're a waste of space.
Thanks. Following that, we found out that he got married and became a father of 2. He and Harry remained on Christmas card terms, and they got their families together every once in a while, something that Harry's kids dreaded. During these visits, Dudley and Harry sat silently together, rarely talking while their kids interacted and played together. And before you comment saying I missed the fact that Dudley married Cho Chang, this never happened. That was just a fan theory that for some reason so many people online believe. Petunia Dursley. As I just mentioned, Dudley had 2 kids, which made Petunia a grandmother. Petunia passed away around the year 2020, meaning she was only about 60 years old, so she died pretty young. I actually posted a theory I had on Twitter that she died because of the pandemic, which many of you agreed on, but obviously that's not canon. Petunia actually had a bit of a redemption, as we found out she kept the blanket Harry was wrapped in when he arrived at their doorstep, and when she died, she left the blanket to him in her will. Vernon Dursley. Vernon also became a grandfather to his son Dudley's 2 kids. He did not die early like Petunia did, meaning he was a widow. Unlike Dudley and Petunia, Vernon never made amends with his nephew Harry and had no sort of redemption arc in the end. George Weasley. Following the battle that took his twin brother from him, George never truly got over Fred's death. He did, however, start dating and eventually married Fred's ex-girlfriend, Angelina Johnson. Together they had 2 kids, a daughter named Roxanne and a son named Fred, who was named after his deceased uncle. George continued to run the joke shop that he and Fred had created, and Weasley's Wizard Wheezes saw great success following the war. The shop's puking pastels became considered contraband in most work environments in the magical community, and hilariously, George became known as the bane to many professors' existence. George was also well beloved by students from various wizarding schools all around the world thanks to their mailing service. Percy Weasley. After making amends with his family, Percy was welcomed back with open arms, something the entire family needed after the passing of Fred. Percy rejoined the Ministry after Kingsley became Minister, and he became the head of the Department of Magical Transportation. He eventually went on to marry a woman named Audrey, and together they had 2 daughters named Molly, who was named after her grandmother, and Lucy. Arthur Weasley. After leaving the Ministry and going on the run with the rest of his family, Arthur and the rest of the Weasleys returned to their home at the Burrow, and under the new leadership of Minister Shacklebolt, Arthur rejoined the Ministry, returning to his original post as the head of the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office, Arthur being thrilled to work with Muggles again. Later on, though, he was promoted to a huge position as the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Arthur also became a grandfather to all of his kids' children, who I'll go over in our next character section on this list. Molly Weasley. Molly was delighted that her family grew, as she became the grandmother of 12 grandchildren, 7 granddaughters, one of which had her namesake, and 5 grandsons, all of whom she adored. Charlie Weasley. Unlike his other siblings, Charlie never married or had kids. He was more interested in studying dragons in Romania than in forming a romantic attachment. However, he did love his nieces and nephews, and they all adored him as well. Bill Weasley. Having married Fleur in the Deathly Hallows, they started a family after the war, having 3 kids, 2 daughters named Victoire and Dominique, and a son named Louis. He also continued his Cursebreaker work for Gringotts, and occasionally went to Egypt, but tried not to too often so he could be home at Shell Cottage with his family. Fleur Delacour. As I just said, Fleur had 3 kids with Bill, and they all inherited her family's Veela side, Veelas being a magical species whose good looks are irresistibly attractive. Although, considering the fact that Fleur herself was only a quarter Veela, there wasn't much there. But Louis is the only known male in the series with Veela in his blood. Fleur was also granted Medals of Honor from the French Ministry of Magic for her part in the war. Rubius Hagrid. Hagrid continued to be the gamekeeper and care of magical creatures professor at Hogwarts, and later he took on the duty of bringing Muggle-born students their Hogwarts acceptance letters, as McGonagall, whose job this used to be, was now headmaster. By 2017, an 89-year-old Hagrid still worked at Hogwarts, and he invited the then first-year boy Albus Potter, the son of Harry and Ginny, down to his hut for tea, just as he had done for Harry in his first year. Minerva McGonagall. Following the Battle of Hogwarts, McGonagall was awarded Order of Merlin First Class, and she was featured on her own chocolate frog card. McGonagall was then unanimously chosen to be the headmistress of Hogwarts. In her first year as headmistress, she accepted those students who had not had a full year of school due to the war, allowing people like Hermione Granger and Dean Thomas to complete their final year of Hogwarts, both of whom had been on the run for the entire previous year. Minerva was vital in taking Hogwarts to its next stage, free of the Defense Against the Dark Arts Professor curse, bringing in brilliant new professors like Neville Longbottom, and honoring those they lost every year on the anniversary of the Battle of Hogwarts. Dolores Umbridge. Following Voldemort's fall, Kingsley ensured that Umbridge paid for her crimes against the innocent Muggleborns she sent to Azkaban with the Dementors, and she herself was arrested, tried, and convicted to a life sentence in Azkaban. However, considering the fact that Kingsley took the Dementors from the prison, it wasn't nearly as bad of a punishment as she gave to all of those innocent Muggleborns. Newt Scamander. Newt is the only Fantastic Beasts character on this list, but I wanted to add him because his story after the prequels is really interesting. Newt ended up marrying Tina, and together they had a baby, who would later give Newt and Tina a grandchild named Ralph, who I already mentioned married Luna. Newt was responsible for the inception of the Werewolf Register, making all werewolves register with the Ministry so they could keep tabs on them. He created the ban of experimental breeding, stopping things like basilisks and acromantula from being bred, which Newt personally said was his greatest achievement in life. Newt also worked extensively with the Dragon Research Restraint Bureau, which led him all around the world, allowing him to gather more information for new editions of Fantastic Beasts and where to find them. Newt was later awarded Order of Merlin Second Class for his services to Magizoology, and he also got his own chocolate frog card. In 2017, the classified documents about his involvement in the events during the Fantastic Beasts film started to leak, so Newt got ahead of the curve and wrote a book discussing everything, saying he had been the first wizard to ever capture Grindelwald, and admitted that he played an active role in defeating him over the next few decades. Lucius Malfoy. Though Lucius was an active Death Eater in both the First and Second Wizarding War, his abandonment of Voldemort during the Battle of Hogwarts kept him out of Azkaban. He went on to help the Ministry capture the remaining Death Eaters by giving them inside information, but his involvement with Voldemort led to Lucius and the entire Malfoy family lose their prized and precious reputation, which they had built up for many generations. As I said earlier, his son Draco eventually married Astoria Greengrass, and though she was pureblood, her views on blood purity made Lucius think of her as a rather disappointing daughter-in-law. Despite this, he constantly nagged her for a grandson to continue on his family name, which he eventually got with his grandson Scorpius Malfoy. Narcissa Malfoy. Narcissa also avoided going to Azkaban, but not because of her desertion like Draco and Lucius, but rather because she saved Harry's life telling Voldemort he was dead when he really wasn't. This act might have also made the punishments of her husband and son lessen as well. At first, Narcissa was ecstatic to have a pureblood daughter-in-law, but like Lucius, she quickly became disappointed as they realized their views on blood purity did not align. Narcissa was very happy that Astoria gave her a grandson though. Rita Skeeter. Following the Battle of Hogwarts, Rita continued on her biography kick, following the life and lives of Albus Dumbledore, and she wrote a biography about Harry Potter, only a quarter of which was true, as well as one about Severus Snape entitled Snape, Scoundrel or Saint. Rita covered the 2014 Quidditch World Cup, and she caused nothing but trouble, as one of her articles led to two managers fighting after the match. She also shamelessly used this opportunity to promote her upcoming book about Dumbledore's army, and she ragged on many members in the article, such as Harry, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Fred, George, and many more. During the final, she reported the match alongside Ginny, and Ginny made many corrections as Rita made crazy, untrue statements about her friends and family, and by the time the match was over, Rita was taken unaccountably ill, the cause of which was suspiciously Ginny's favorite hex. Rita wrote her final book in 2017, this time about Newt, called Man or Monster, The Truth About Newt Scamander, and like all of her other books, most of it was rubbish. One claim even stated that Newt broke the American minister's heart in 1926, which was when the first Fantastic Beasts film took place, but in his own book, Newt revealed that Rita had completely made this up. Oliver Wood. As we found out in the fourth book, following his graduation from Hogwarts, Oliver became the keeper for Puddlemere United's reserve team, and in the final book, he participated in the Battle of Hogwarts. Following the fight, Oliver helped move the bodies of the fallen, and eventually went back to his small-time Quidditch career. Gilderoy Lockhart. The fifth book told us how Lockhart had permanently lost his memory and had to spend the rest of his life in St. Mungo's Hospital. He had someone help write his final book entitled Who Am I? Most of the public did not know that he was a fraud, many still believing that he accomplished all the things he took credit for. Because of this, he still received lots of fan mail, but he had no idea why. He did continue to sign autographs that he would send back to fans though. Over time, he would get some of his memory back, which was evidenced by him remembering his signature, but he never fully recovered. Fortunately, however, he was known to be happier that way. Cho Chang. After helping in the Battle of Hogwarts, Cho went on to marry a Muggle man, who, just to be clear, was not Dudley. Again, that's just a fan theory. It was stated that Cho had a happy marriage and lived out a fulfilled life. Viktor Krum. Viktor Krum actually has a really interesting story following the series. He continued his Quidditch career into the 2000s, and after 8 years in the league, he made it to the Quidditch World Cup again. But unfortunately, he was just narrowly beaten to the snitch by the other seeker, losing his second World Cup. After the loss, a tearful Krum announced his retirement. After 12 years, though, he returned to the game for the 2014 season. When asked by the press why he's coming back, he said, "To win the World Cup before I die." They ended up making it to the World Cup, and during the match, the very old Krum caught the snitch, finally securing a victory. He held the snitch up proudly, crying of happiness. Gregory Goyle. Goyle survived the Battle of Hogwarts, although in the film he did not, but we're going by the books, and in the books it was Crabbe who died, not Goyle. Following the battle, his longtime friendship with Draco had ended, and he no longer looked up to the idol he had followed for the last 7 years. Pansy Parkinson. Pansy, who had once adored Draco, having a major crush on him, severed ties with Malfoy after his family lost all notoriety. Dean Thomas. After spending what was supposed to be his 7th year of Hogwarts on the run, Dean returned to Hogwarts the following year to finish out his schooling. Seamus Finnegan. Like his best friend Dean, Seamus decided to redo his 7th year at Hogwarts. He had been at school for the entire year, but he spent the majority of it hiding in the Room of Requirement. Barty Crouch Jr. Barty Jr. got a fate worse than death, as he received the Dementor's kiss at the end of the Goblet of Fire, which was actually an accident caused by Fudge. Crouch was sent back to Azkaban, though this did not mean much, as his mind was completely gone. Voldemort didn't even think it was worth it to break him out during the events of the Order of the Phoenix or the Deathly Hallows, meaning Barty Jr. spent the rest of his life in his cell. Teddy Lupin. Teddy, the son of Nymphadora and Remus Lupin, was raised by his maternal grandmother Andromeda Tonks after his parents died in the Battle of Hogwarts when he was just a baby. His godfather Harry was there for him as well, and played a big part in raising him. So much so that both sides of his family, the Potters and the Weasleys, considered Teddy to be part of their family. Luckily, Teddy did not possess any werewolf tendencies, which his father was terrified he would pass down to his son. However, he did inherit his mother's Metamorph Mage's powers, meaning he could change his appearance at will. When Teddy went to Hogwarts, he was sorted into Hufflepuff just like his mother. He eventually started dating Victoire Weasley, Bill and Fleur's daughter, and they were caught kissing both at the 2014 Quidditch World Cup and on Platform 9 3/4 during the epilogue. The year that the epilogue took place, Teddy was going into his 7th and final year, and he was head boy, showing that he was a very smart and respectable student at Hogwarts. Andromeda Tonks. Following the war, Andromeda had lost so much. Her husband Ted Tonks, her daughter Nymphadora, and her son-in-law Remus Lupin. Luckily though, she still had her grandson Teddy, who she raised with the help of Harry and his family. Creature. After having a redemption arc and leading all of the house elves into the Battle of Hogwarts, Kreacher continued to work in the Hogwarts kitchens, though he was still technically owned by Harry, whom he had grown great respect for. Kreacher eventually passed away in 2017 at the age of 666, and looking at 666, I'm sure Rowling did that on purpose. Alecto Carrow. Alecto did not participate in the Battle of Hogwarts, as Harry and McGonagall tied her and her brother up in the Ravenclaw common room before the battle even started, and once the fight was over, she was taken to Azkaban for torturing innocent students. Amicus Carrow. Like his sister, Amicus did not participate in the battle because he too was tied up before it started, and following the battle, he too was sentenced to life in Azkaban. Filius Flitwick. Following the final battle, Flitwick continued on teaching charms at Hogwarts, and he continued to be the Ravenclaw's head of house for many years to come. Grawp. We just recently found out what happened to Grawp after the Battle of Hogwarts. As many suspected, the giant living in the Forbidden Forest and in the caves in the mountains that surrounded Hogwarts and Hogsmeade. Aberforth Dumbledore. Following the battle, Aberforth celebrated their victory with Dean Thomas and Seamus Finnegan, as he had grown very close to Seamus that year with a tunnel that led to his pub. And speaking of his pub, the Hog's Head, Aberforth continued to run it until his eventual death. Fenrir Greyback. Though Greyback was not a Death Eater himself, he spread violence for the Death Eaters and Voldemort's gain, and he was sentenced to life in Azkaban for killing, eating, and turning innocent children into werewolves. Horace Slughorn. Slughorn continued to teach at Hogwarts after the war, and he carried on as the head of Slytherin House. But in 2016, he officially retired, and he had the honor of having a portrait of himself hung in the Slytherin common room. Xenophilius Lovegood. During the events of the Deathly Hallows, Xenophilius was sent to Azkaban, and luckily for him, the Quibbler magazine he was going to publish that slandered Harry and built up Voldemort was never released, meaning he was remembered as someone who always supported Harry through and through, though Harry, Ron, and Hermione of course knew the truth. Following the good side's victory, Xenophilius was released and reunited with his daughter Luna, which was really all he wanted. Luna would eventually make Xenophilius a grandfather to her twin boys Lorcan and Lysander. Angelina Johnson. Angelina was devastated about Fred's death, as she had dated Fred for a number of years. Following his death, she grew closer with Fred's twin, George Weasley, and they eventually started dating, then got married, and they had 2 children together, one of which was named after Fred. Years later, Angelina had to care for her sick father. Meanwhile, George and the kids went to the 2014 Quidditch World Cup, and Rita Skeeter reported that Angelina was not there because she had grown restless in her marriage with George. However, was also reporting on this match, shut down these rumors right away, telling everyone the truth of how Angelina was caring for her sick father, which made Rita look very stupid. Lee Jordan. Lee was of course heartbroken over Fred's death as well, and he was there for George in his time of need, even helping him run his joke shop for a while. Mundungus Fletcher. Mundungus did not help in the Battle of Hogwarts, as he went into hiding after his encounter with the trio. Once the war was over, he came out of hiding and returned to his life of dealing, scamming, and committing crimes to make money. Cornelius Fudge. The people forced Fudge out of office, and Fudge himself said that he had never seen the wizarding community be so united on any other decision during his administration. Just as Dumbledore had predicted, Fudge became one of the least effective ministers in history. To quote Dumbledore, he became the man who stepped aside and allowed Voldemort a second chance to destroy what the wizarding community tried so hard to build. Fudge forever had to keep a low profile, as he would forever be one of the most despised people throughout all of the wizarding world. Walden McNair. After being launched and thrown against the wall by Hagrid during the final battle, something that was obviously fueled by McNair being the one who was meant to execute Buckbeak, his unconscious form awoke to the battle being over, his side having lost, and he was sentenced to life in Azkaban for his crimes as a Death Eater. Argus Filch. Filch helped put the castle back together after the fight, and he continued his role as caretaker of the school, and he also continued his heated rivalry with Peeves the Poltergeist. Sybil Trelawney. Sybil continued to work at Hogwarts as the divination professor, and she eventually went on to write a book entitled My Eyes and How to See Past Them, which was pretty successful, though this was credited to her last name Trelawney, as she was related to a very famous and very respected seer back in the day named Cassandra Trelawney. Parvati Patil. Parvati returned to Hogwarts to redo her 7th and final year of schooling, but it wasn't quite the same without her best friend Lavender there, who had died in the Battle of Hogwarts. Padma Patil. Padma also returned to redo her 7th year, but it was far more normal for her, as she was a Ravenclaw student and was not as close to Lavender as her twin sister was. Pomona Sprout. Sprout continued as the head of Hufflepuff House and continued teaching herbology at Hogwarts. She was delighted to have Neville Longbottom, one of her favorite and best students, return, and she trained him to become a herbology professor as well. The two taught alongside each other until Sprout retired in 2020, and she had full confidence that Neville could be her successor. Ollivander. Ollivander returned to his wand shop after the war ended, and after fixing it up a bit, as it had been raided and empty for 2 years, he was back in business. Augustus Rookwood. Rookwood, the Death Eater responsible for Fred's death in the final battle, was later stunned by Aberforth Dumbledore, and following the battle, he was sentenced to life in Azkaban. Antonin Dolohov. Dolohov, the man who killed Remus Lupin, was later defeated by Flitwick, and he too was sentenced to life in Azkaban for his crimes as a Death Eater. Olympe Maxime. Maxime continued as the headmistress of Beauxbaton, the French wizarding school. Her relationship with Hagrid unfortunately did not work out because, as she put it, she was too sophisticated for him. Pius Thicknesse. Pius Thicknesse was an interesting case for the Ministry following the war because he had acted as a Death Eater and was loyal to Voldemort while Minister of Magic, but he was under the Imperius Curse, meaning he did not know what he was doing. He was of course replaced by Kingsley, and Thicknesse was never seen as a true minister. Unfortunately for him, most of what he did, both good and bad, was wiped from the record. The Ministry did let him walk free though, which was the right decision. Cormac McLaggen. Cormac was a year older than the trio, so he finished up at Hogwarts during the events of the Half-Blood Prince. However, he was seen in the movie going back for one final year, but he didn't appear in any of the 7th book. He had moved on from Hogwarts and did not return for the Battle of Hogwarts. Corbin Yaxley. At the very end of the battle, Yaxley was defeated in a duel against George Weasley and Lee Jordan in the Great Hall, and following Voldemort's death, he was sentenced to life in Azkaban, mainly for being a Death Eater, but also for helping Umbridge capture and sentence innocent Muggleborns. Katie Bell. Like Cormac, Katie Bell finished her final year during the events of the Half-Blood Prince, but again, the film had her returning as a student in the 7th installment. Unlike Cormac though, Katie did return to Hogwarts for the final battle, which she knew to do because of her DA coin. Following the fight, she moved on with her life outside of school. Alicia Spinnet. Alicia actually graduated during the events of the Order of the Phoenix, but seeing her DA coin calling her, she too came back to Hogwarts. After the battle though, she too moved on with her life outside of school. Firenze. Having been banished by the other centaurs during the events of the Order of the Phoenix, Firenze was delighted when his herd invited him back after the Battle of Hogwarts. They had originally banished him for teaching humans their ways as a divination professor, but the rest of the herd came to realize that Firenze's views on humans was not shameful, but rather was honorable. Firenze continued to teach at Hogwarts after the battle, but he now lived in the Forbidden Forest with the rest of his herd rather than in the castle. Fawkes. The night that Dumbledore died, Fawkes sang his Phoenix Lament, which was a form of song expressed by the magical birds, and the magic of his music touched the soul of everybody who heard it. When he was finished, Fawkes left Hogwarts and never returned, because now that his beloved owner was gone, he became a wild phoenix. Buckbeak. After Sirius died, Buckbeak was left to Harry, who then decided to leave the Hippogriff with his original owner, Hagrid. Buckbeak lived out his days at Hogwarts as one of Hagrid's many pets. He spent most of his time in the Forbidden Forest, and he was occasionally used by Hagrid for care of magical creatures lessons. Winky. Winky of course fell into a depression and turned into an alcoholic after her master Barty Sr. had been killed, and her other master Barty Crouch Jr., the one responsible for his father's death, was given the Dementor's kiss. Winky slowly improved over the years though, as she worked in the Hogwarts kitchens and fought in the Battle of Hogwarts. After the fight, she got control of her drinking habits, though she still had a few drinks here and there, and she continued to work in the Hogwarts kitchens. Arabella Figg. Mrs. Figg was of course a squib, meaning she was born from magical parents, but had no magical ability herself. However, she did breed part Kneaselcats, a kind of magical creature, and following the war, which she was unable to fight in for obvious reasons, she continued to breed her part Kneaselcats. Blaise Zabini. Unlike in the film, Blaise did not fight in the Battle of Hogwarts. He actually left with the other Slytherin students through the Hog's Head passageway, though again the movie changed this, as the Slytherins didn't escape but were sent to the dungeons.
Exactly where is it I'll be leading them to, Mom?
The dungeons would do.
Because he did not fight in the battle though, nor did he associate with any illegal activity, he did not receive a punishment. Stan Shunpike. After Stan tried to show off in a pub saying he had inside information of the Death Eater's plans, which he really didn't, the Ministry got word of this and sent him to Azkaban. Once there was a breakout, Stan was put under the Imperius Curse, and he operated among the Death Eaters, most notably being part of the Battle of Seven Potters. After Voldemort fell, however, the Imperius Curse was lifted, and though he was originally sentenced, he was allowed to walk free. Zachariah Smith. Though Smith was a member of Dumbledore's army, he did not help in the Battle of Hogwarts, opting to instead leave the school. He was even seen pushing first-year students out of the way to get out faster. Reginald Cattermole. Reginald, along with his wife and kids, were able to escape Voldemort and his Death Eaters thanks to the trio telling them to do so.
Get the kids. I'll meet you there. We have to get out of the country, understand?
Mafalda Hopkirk. After being replaced by Hermione Granger, Hopkirk returned very confused, but afterwards she went back to her normal job at the Ministry. Albert Runcorn. Having helped Umbridge with their Muggle-born Registration Act and just being overall corrupt, Runcorn was sentenced to time in Azkaban, though he was released after a while, unlike Umbridge and most Death Eaters. Ludo Bagman. Following the Triwizard Tournament where he tried to gamble with some goblins and lost, he went on the run, abandoning his post as head of magical games and sports in the Ministry, and after that he was sort of forgotten. That is, until a rumor popped up that an old retired Quidditch star would take the pitch again in 2014, but this of course ended up being Crumb and not Bagman. Amos Diggory. Amos never truly got over the loss of his son Cedric, despite his killers being dead themselves, as both Voldemort and Wormtail died. He eventually ended up living in St. Oswald's home for old witches and wizards. The very old Amos eventually scheduled a meeting with Harry, and here one of the few good lines in the stage play was brought up. How many people have died for the boy who lived? Which was of course referencing his son Cedric, who he believed died to save Harry. He then asked Harry to use the time turner so he could bring Cedric back to life, and it's absolutely wild that this plot point is considered canon. But anyway, when looking at Amos, he had a very sad life after his son died. Marge Dursley. After being blown up, Marge was deflated, brought back down, and had her memory wiped by the Ministry, meaning she had no memory of the events from that night. Although she didn't have that memory though, the Dursleys did, and after that, they never again invited Marge to stay with them while Harry was there. Marietta Edgecombe. After Marietta betrayed the DA, it sparked Hermione's jinx, making the word sneak be written on her face in pimples. So the question is, did she ever get this removed from her face after the series ended? The answer was yes, sort of. The pimples eventually began to fade, but she would always have scars. Justin Finch Fletchley. After having to pull out of school for his final year at Hogwarts due to him being a Muggle-born, Justin was able to return to his schooling the following year, joining Hermione, Dean, Seamus, and so many more. Rolanda Hooch. Madam Hooch returned to her post as the flying instructor and Quidditch referee, and she continued to do so for 18 years after the series ended, until finally in 2020, she retired at the age of 102. Augusta Longbottom. Having been disappointed in the way her grandson Neville turned out for most of the series, Augusta was thrilled when Neville came through a hero, and after helping him in the Battle of Hogwarts, she had never been prouder of her grandson. She also lived long enough to meet her granddaughter-in-law, Hannah Abbott, and seeing Neville happy with her made her happy. Ernie Macmillan. Like so many others in their year at Hogwarts, Ernie returned for another year of school after helping fight in the Battle of Hogwarts. Poppy Pomfrey. Madame Pomfrey helped patch everyone up after the battle was over, which was a huge task considering how brutal the battle had been. And moving forward, she continued to be the nurse at Hogwarts. Around 2014 though, she retired and handed her position over to Hannah Abbott, or Hannah Longbottom, the wife of her biology professor Neville Longbottom. Thorfinn Rao. Rao was arrested following the final battle, and like so many other Death Eaters, he was sentenced to life in Azkaban. Crookshanks. Crookshanks stayed with the Weasleys while Hermione was on the run with Harry and Ron, and once the battle was over, he was reunited with Hermione. Crookshanks lived many more years, possibly even until 2021, meaning he was there while Hugo and Rose, Ron and Hermione's kids, grew up. Peeves. After the Battle of Hogwarts, Peeves sang a victory song, and moving forward, he continued to torment the students and staff in the years to come, especially Argus Filch, who even years later still had not caught Peeves enough to get him kicked out of the castle. And there it is, what happened to all 90 characters after the series ended. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Did anyone's fate surprise you? Did you think anyone deserved a different ending? Let me know. I can't wait to read your thoughts. That's all I have for you guys today though, so I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. You can follow me on Instagram to see more of my personal life, like my cute dog Loki, and some behind-the-scenes movie flame stuff. I also do similar content on TikTok and Twitter that I do here on this channel. So if you like what I do here, check them out. All the handles are right below me, and links are in the description. Over here are my wonderful patrons.